No, for me, just to tap on Roots a little bit, I was actually excited that they did that because take my card away. I had never seen the original.
Yeah.
And so I wanted, so I was like, and I wanted to
why
watch
we
it,
made
but
it.
exactly. So
you are the
it gave
reason.
me, and thank you. Like, so now I guess thank you, because it was an experience to really watch that. So I'm glad that they decided to remake that.
I mean, it was amazing. And you did an incredible job.
Thank you.
Incredible job.
But that, incidentally, everything you just touched on that's my driving force whenever I try to do a job on a show like Roots. For me, myself, it's always about how you can put yourself in service. That's the running motive of my ideology. And so in Roots, I'm in service to representing an awful lot of people on an awful lot of different levels. I'm sure I'm representing everyone at this table in a slightly different way. You haven't seen it. You were suddenly seeing yourself reflected. And that's so incredibly important, to see yourself both professionally and just as a human. Reflected back in the world with your own flaws, with your own aspirations, and just kind of seeing what the range of our humanity can be in the context of a history that has not only stripped that humanity away completely, but then we live in a world that still lives in that context and has it severely limited. And so I think so much of what we do, even what we're doing now in the studio when we put ourselves out there, is about expanding those borders and saying, check it out, we all exist, we're all beautiful, we are all capable of wonderful and terrible things, and we can be all of that all at once.
That's amazing.
I got a little bit sidetracked there.
Reading that you had an experience with your parents. You were younger. There was like a school or something to get into.
You have been digging. Where did you read this?
We wanted the dirt.
Don't say we wanted the dirt. You want to
we
go
wanted
deep.
the dirt.
You want to go deep. We're going to go there. No, but so I believe you went.
I was selling, okay?
Listen, careful what you ask for. Careful what you ask for.
Different.
But so your mother was taking you to a school. And so what is your mother's background?
My mother's Zimbabwean.
Okay. And then your father is British.
Yeah.
Okay. So your mother was taking you to the school. They claimed there was no admission. He couldn't get in. He goes back with just his father. Now he can get in.
Inside
with
this
admission.
space.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the joys of a freshly post-apartheid Zimbabwe at the time. And I mean, it's like I was saying, everything is context. You know, just the little things. I'm gonna take a slight tangent, but I will come back.
Okay.
One of the things that I've been so happy about with Shondaland and with this show, one of the reasons that I decided, okay, I'll put up with being Leonard for a while, is because it is wonderful that she makes representative TV. Like, diversity is a bit of a buzzword, and it's nice that we've kind of helped folks in with this baby step of a trend and a hashtag that they come up with, but what we want to work towards is representation. A world that represents the world that we live in. And so much of the time, particularly after Roots, you read scripts and you find yourself either, and this happens in life, you find yourself either tokenized or a fetish or some kind of catharsis magnet for violence. And what I found in this show is that Leonard is, and again, I don't think this has even come up, he's not defined in any way, shape, or form by his cultural context, by his background, by his skin color. Leonard's a man.
Right.
Leonard exists in the context of a world that puts certain constraints and awarenesses on him. But that's not like the adjectives that describe the character, the first one was not African American.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you now, 80% of the scripts I get, the first adjective is African American.
Wow.
You know?
That's a
and it's just like, if that's the definition of who this person is to you, then I know you haven't written this character.
Exactly.
Right.
See what I mean?
Yeah. So it's beautiful that Leonard wasn't the first.
No, in fact, I'm relatively sure that wasn't a thought when writing him. And I'm glad to have brought something to that. And so, sorry, remind me of the original question.
I was bringing up your parents. So the whole issue with the school, like going with your mom not being able to get in, going with your dad. So seeing that difference, seeing that that prejudice put in front of you when you played in Roots. How did that reflect, like, with your real life? Because you played in an era of slavery. You were transitioning into kind of the free man and things like that. But yet, in your life, you've seen this kind of a bit of racism. So, like, did you pull from those things, and how did it also make you feel that some of these things are still going on?
For me, Right, this is what I was trying to link back to. Everything that I do in terms of putting out images into culture, that's what I try to imagine my job as, is that, you put out images into the world, someone's got to do it, and if you're going to step in, then you have a responsibility about the images you put out.
Yes.
And so every time I step on screen, I know that I represent a certain idea. Just, I don't have a choice in that. I realized that early on. Like, this comes on, and there's a certain history that comes with that.
Yeah.
And the more that I can flesh it out and make it three-dimensional, and make it not the cipher that you expect from it, to make these people not defined by the tone of my skin when I walk on screen, and make these people defined by their humanity, by their flaws. But again, because it helps us learn to relate to each other. It helps, and my big kick is all about empathy. I think that what my job is about growing empathy. It's about growing, oh God, if I'm going to get pretentious about it, a shared consciousness of our humanity. Because I think that so much of what media does when it's done badly is it dehumanizes us. It reduces us to these two-dimensional ciphers. And if anything else, I want to be the guy on the other side going and inflating that cipher back up into 3 dimensions. So everything I touch is about people who do live in the context of that world. And representing, we had a very interesting conversation about this just outside the studio before we started, the complexities and the contradictions of that. And so it's not about the prejudice you experience, it's about the person that builds. It's about the scars you carry with you, it's about how you paper them over, how you protect yourself, what your survival mechanisms are. Because George was one great big collection of survival mechanisms.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And again, I don't think you'd be hard pressed to try and find those same survival mechanisms in our world now, 200-300 years later. In terms of where we find our celebrities, we're allowed to perform, we ain't allowed to kneel. But we can perform. And so we find power where we can, and we find spaces to put ourselves out in public and be defined by ourselves. And so whenever I do whatever work it is that I do, I have that at the forefront of my brain. It's never about putting a spotlight on that adversity. It's about putting a spotlight on the people that adversity builds and how they relate to the world around them that lives with that in it.
Another Brit, I hear an accent.
Yeah, I'm based in London, but I mean, I'm kind of nominally British. I grew up in Zimbabwe. I've become one of the only cast members that I ran into, I don't know about South Africa, who's lived in Africa. And I specifically just said thank you to Malachi, because as someone who grew up in Africa, often when we see ourselves portrayed on television, particularly by Americans, there's a bit of a wry smile. It's like, oh, that's what you think we're like. But that's one of the best portrayals and one of the most respectful portrayals of African life and African history, because I've seen very little respect for African history from anyone, including growing up in Africa. So that just touched me just now, actually.
What was your motivation for Chicken George? How did you connect with the character?
George is huge. He's kind of a big character in every sense of the word. And so there's kind of so much to connect with. You mostly just have to get yourself out of the way, I find, as an actor, and just let him come through. There's so much material on the page. Again, literally, he talks through like 90 pages of my night. And so it's mostly just kind of letting someone with that kind of so much energy in the most extreme of circumstances, and trying to figure out where you find that, what you're doing with it, and be respectful of anyone who can be that extraordinary under that much pressure in circumstances so unhospitable, and just kind of, like I said, be respectful of that, get out of the way of it, and let George tell his own story, and kind of accommodate that as much as possible. You know what I mean?
Yes. And you can tell when you see it. I mean, it's unbelievable. And your wife, partner, played by Erica, Matilda. What is so fascinating is part of the storyline is that she loses her husband. He's taken away. And the strength and the dignity that you show, because you keep your family together. And I want you to sort of talk about the power and the importance of the female character in Roots, because while Kunta Kinte is sort of the meat of this, of course, women play such a strong role. I mean, you saw it here when the woman was helping them try to take over the ship. So there was a real partnership that you show. What's your take on that?
My body is still shaking. Thank you for your work, Malachi. Thank you so much.
This is the first time you've seen it, so they saw it for the first time also.
We're
going to hear from them.
There are definitely many and several representations of strong and resilient women throughout the miniseries. As the fourth matriarch of this family, I devoted a lot of attention to the matriarchs that preceded me, Binta, Belle, and Kizzy. I looked at a lot of their relationships with their children, Binta to Kunta, Belle to Kizzy, and then myself. And Belle to Kizzy, and then Kizzy to George, obviously, which I witnessed firsthand. And the obvious purpose and role that we give in this story is that we are literally the physical carriers of the lineage that begins with Kunta and ends with Alex Haley. And then when I was reading Night One, and it was so beautifully portrayed when Binta gives the necklace to Kunta, I began to think a lot about the ancestral torch. And that necklace obviously makes it to America, and it ends the series with us.
We just had a moment just now watching that. I saw that those beads get passed on, and we have that moment. Cut 3 episodes later.
Exactly.
And just kind of seeing something literally, physically get passed through the generations. It's really cool to see that for the first time.
Yeah, so in terms of that, I also began to embrace us as the carriers, the protectors, and the passers of that ancestral torch, which that necklace became very symbolic for me So there's that. I have to say this about Ruth, and then I'm going to put a pin in it and come back to it. Last year, Essence Magazine honored Ruth as one of their Black Women in Hollywood honorees, and before she read her acceptance speech, she took the stage and she looked at this room filled with African American women, and she asked us, I'm gonna cry, can you feel the power of our presence? And she asked it again, can you feel the power of our presence? Okay, so put a pin in that.